Your behavior will change with time once you start knowing women, people. So many times guys are very worried about not being boring when they are with beautiful women. The thing is that if you try to be very funny, very playful, and trying to come across as someone who is very interesting and have a lot of interesting things to say right out of the bat with a stranger, that's not going to go well. Most of the time, women are not ready to comprehend your so-called funniness and coolness. And why is that? Well, she doesn't know you. So even though she finds you somewhat amusing, it doesn't have a real effect because it's coming from someone she doesn't know anything about. So to use real scientific principles, we need to create connection, and we need to establish a connection first before everything else sinks in. And the cool thing is that even though you feel that you are not a particular funny person or you don't have so much interesting things to say, well, that might be true in the beginning. But once you start knowing a person, it's not until then elements of yourself being somewhat humorous and amusing comes up to the surface. It just isn't there in the beginning because you don't have any content either to use to be funny, playful, and humorous human being. And as we know also from the scientific world, in order to be really interesting, it's not so much about saying interesting things. It's to be interested toward the other person. But that's a different story. So your personality and behavior towards a specific person that you start knowing quite well will change your way of your interaction with that person, specifically when it comes to women. I mean, you feel more confident and comfortable when you start knowing them, and you can act in a different way with time. So don't push yourself in the beginning of trying to be someone you're not. Always go from the perspective of being yourself and let the other part sink in later on, such as being cool, being funny, playful, etc. We're now focusing about creating connection first when we're talking with a stranger that happens to be a very attractive woman. And I've been coaching hundreds of guys, real communication skills that is based on human principles and human behavior. And many of them are not particularly funny. They're not particularly interesting either. I mean, they haven't done so much in their life that would give the woman a wow effect or something like that. No, they're just themselves, and they are pretty average, normal guys. The only skill they have that sticks out from the crowd massively is that they really pay attention to what she says and are genuinely curious, because that curiosity gives them direction of how to behave and how to be towards beautiful women and people that they want to talk to. That itself gives them a confident boost like nothing else. And that just shines through the whole interaction. I've seen a lot of men being very playful, very funny, having a lot of passive value, and doesn't succeed with getting women at all. As a rule of thumb, because they don't have the important scientific principles nailed down. We can't, bypass the scientific evidence, the scientific principles in human behavior. We just can't. And I mean, nothing is also black and white. There are lots of different nuances between black and white. But me as a person want to go with things as a rule, as a general part of doing things. I don't want to chase the exception of the rule. For example, I know a lot of men who think that they are very successful with women and trying to tell other people how to do things that is not based on scientific evidence. And what I can see is that it might work, but only for an exception of the masses, not as the masses of as a rule. I mean, if you would go and ask 200 girls out on a date right on the bat, you're just saying, "Hi, I'm Michael, I want to take you out for a date," without any kind of connection or something like that, there will always be someone who probably say yes. But they don't do that as a rule. They're doing that as an exception of the rule. So there are some girls that in that moment feel like she wants to do that, but women in general don't want to do that. So as a rule, specifically for women that have a lot of male attention, you have to establish some kind of connection before you're asking them out. And even worse, if you're asking hundreds of women to sleep with you, to have sex with you, maybe one in a couple of hundred will say yes. Would that be as a rule? No, there will be a mega exception from the rule. So I'm working with making things as a rule because I'm not a big fan of chasing the exceptions of the rule. Anyway, guys, I am Mr. Silk, and I hope this content gave you some value. Wait for my next video because it's going to be very interesting to talk about the interaction between men and women. I see you in the next video.